If you've ever taken your children to a family-friendly movie and then to see the plot line go south, unfortunately, that's what we're going to do today. As we continue with Abraham, we're in Genesis chapter 19. We just finished with chapter 18, where Abraham was bartering with God in hopes of saving those that lived in Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities of the plains. They bartered down to, if I could only find 10, would you be willing to save these cities? And God agreed. He more than agreed. He was teaching Abram how merciful he can be. In our efforts to understand the Bible correctly, we're going to get right into this as far as it is translated correctly. Genesis chapter 19, verse 1, and there came two angels. Remember, these are Malaks, or messengers from God, to Sodom at even, meaning evening. And Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, and Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face towards the ground. But yet, in the Joseph Smith translation for this verse, Joseph Smith restores the three angels, that not just two, but three. And we'll talk about those differences. In fact, Brother Halverson talks about it. And there came two angels to Sodom at evening. Now, wait. Only two? I thought there were three. Did one get lost along the way? What happened? Well, here Joseph Smith helps us with the Joseph Smith translation, the inspired version. This is one of those minor corrections. He says, no, there are three. They stuck together. That's different than what our Hebrew scholar Nehemiah said. He was thinking that one of the angels, the messenger, stayed with Abraham and bartered with him, while the other two continued to save Lot and his family before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. But Brother Halverson says, okay, so three angels to Sodom at evening, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. Originally he pitched his tents toward Sodom. Well, it's a matter of a chapter or two, and we find him dwelling in Sodom. Uh, and soon he's captive. Oh, remember, he was taken captive when Sodom was conquered by their enemy with the coalition in the previous chapters. But then Abraham, with his commando raid, he went and rescued Lot, his nephew Lot. But where do we find Lot? He's right back here at Sodom, and he's at the gate, sitting at the gate. At the gate, often that's where the city's elders and leaders would sit at the gate to pass judgment. This was like the benchmark of the Supreme Court. This was the gate of the city. And what do we allow in here and what do we keep out? So just understand, when in scriptures we see the word the gates, and Jeremiah the prophet will learn about him often being at the gates judging the city. So just keep that in mind. The gates of the city often are symbolic of judgment. This says a lot about Lot. Best case scenario, he has risen in the estimation of his peers, Brother Halverson says, and even though they don't want to live by his standards, they're glad that he does. Such an interesting irony. Perhaps we have felt that way ourselves, where we are respected and even admired by people because of the way we live, but they don't want to live the way that we do. So that's the best case scenario. What's the worst case scenario? Would be that we're just one more step in the wrong direction, and this is what it appears to be for Lot. He went from pitching his tent, facing Sodom and Gomorrah, and dwelling in it, and not only is he dwelling here in the city, he seems to be hanging out with the higher ranks at the city gate. Do we make compromises with our culture? Brother Howerson asks. To be in the world, but be not of the world. These are things we struggle with, trying to be an influence for good despite the wickedness around us. Either way, he's sitting here at the gate and he sees these holy men coming. Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. This sounds a little bit like Abraham when he met the three angels at his door. Lot still recognizes righteousness. He still honors true messengers, Brother Halverson says. Now, verse 2, my Lord, he says. But that's basically the word for like a landlord, or the manor, in England, the lord of the manor. And in Hebrew, my lords in this context is not Adonai, but Adonis, which is plural for lords or lord. So Lot says, behold now, my lords, my Adonis, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, which he's referring to himself, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early and go on your ways. And they said, Nay, but we will abide in the street all night. Now that's interesting. Lot knows something that he assumes they don't know. I'm not sure if that's the best or wisest course of action. You're strangers here in Sodom, which means you probably don't know that the streets at night are no place to stay. So what does he do? Well, verse 3. He presses upon them greatly turned and they turned into unto him and entered into his house, and he made them a feast. He baked them unleavened bread, and they did eat. Do you understand all these amazing analogies, Brother Howerson asked? Do we really know what's happening outside and inside? There's a flood of evil, and those floods of evil always bring consequences. If we understand just how dark the night can be, believe me, if they only knew where the light was, they'd come running. If they only knew where safety could be found. And that's what Doctrine and Covenants section 45 says. The rest of the world will be in such wickedness and violence and turmoil, the only safe place eventually will be Zion and her stakes. People will come. Are we helping? Are we facilitating? Are we pressing upon them greatly? Now, our Hebrew scholar says verses 1 through 3, which we just read, are Lot's, or he would say Lot's, best efforts at hospitality. This is about all that's left of his sort of being righteous. Back when he was Abram, prior to pitching his tent towards Sodom and Gomorrah. So he's learned his hospitality from Abraham. Now, Brother Howerson continues with verse 4. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. So the entire city is gathered around the house. Talk about a scary situation. We're using Sodom and Gomorrah as our metaphor for the wicked world, and we have been ever since. The story is often Babylon or Sodom and Gomorrah or Egypt are symbolic of the world or a wicked culture. Do you sometimes feel compassed round about by evil? He asked. Does it affect both the old and the young? Does it seem to come from every quarter? There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Well, I'm still safe within my sanctuary of standards. I hope so. Now, in verse 5, it goes from scary to nightmarish. Back in verse 4, our Methodist minister says, verse 4 is a description of how depraved Sodom is. Anyone passing by Sodom was fair game to be raped. Wow, I don't even like saying that word. No matter how old or young they are, or what gender they are, if you and your group are traveling or not strong enough to protect themselves, you are fair game. If they can get away with it, they will do it. Continually carnal and depraved in mind and body, a rape culture, not unlike our day, he adds. Now here we go with verse 5. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we might know them. And just remember that in the biblical understanding, in the Hebrew language, to know would be very intimate, but in this case, if it's involuntary, that would equal the R word once again. Brother Howerson, he says, bring them out to us that we may know them. By now, we should know this word know. In Hebrew, it's intimate knowledge. In the right way, it's described the experiential connection with God, to know God. This is life eternal, that we might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. The worst case scenario is somewhere in the middle. It is kind of intimate knowledge between like Abraham and Sarah. That pleasure that she was referring to in her case is joy, the true meaningful joy of family relationships. That's the pleasure, the post paradise, the east of Eden in our relationships, in our families. But this situation is a far cry from that. Here, these wicked men of Sodom are seeking the righteous men within. Bring them out to us so we can know them. This is intimate knowledge. This is sexual assault. That is being threatened. That's from Brother Halverson, our LDS scholar. Now, Jono, our scholar from Australia, he says, as we go on here, we discover how incredibly depraved Sodom is. Now, things get kind of weird here. If you guys want to have a go at it, he's speaking to Nehemiah, our Hebrew scholar, and our Methodist minister. Um, he's speaking to both of them. I don't know how to explain it. All the men of the city, it seems, decide that they want to go and they want to have sex with these two men. Sorry, kids, but this is what it says. It's in the Bible. They want Lot to bring the two men out so that they can have their way with them. It gets even weirder. Lot goes out there and says, don't do this terrible, terrible thing. Now back to Nehemiah Gordon. That's why the angels strike them with blindness. That's the no in the Bible makes sense. Just like Adam knew Eve, his wife, the fact that he's saying, no, my daughters, instead tells you what their intention was. Nehemiah continues, well, I think what's happening is Lot and the men of Sodom are caricatures almost to the opposite of Abraham, because Abraham is this righteous man who offers hospitality to three strangers and he doesn't even know them. They come by in the middle of the desert and he offers them hospitality. The men of Sodom are the exact opposite. When strangers come to town, nobody takes them in. The one who takes them in is the other people of the town come and, well, they basically attack these men. Lot also doesn't quite understand the idea of hospitality either. He's taken the idea of hospitality, he's almost treated it in a legalistic way. He learned this from Abraham about hospitality, so he's he's imitating what Abraham has done. But at this point, he's now harming his own family because he's like, we've got this law of hospitality. We've taken in the strangers. Now, he doesn't have to be righteous. He's just imitating and going through the motions of hospitality. And he offers his daughters. Oh, don't rape these men, rape my daughters instead. He's almost as wicked as the men of Sodom, maybe more in a sense. He definitely didn't get saved from that situation because he deserved it. Basically, it tells us later that Lot will be saved only because of Abraham. God was doing Abraham a favor. Now, some of that I can't agree with, and you'll see why. Now, back to our LDS scholar, thankfully, he says in verse 6, Lot has been out again. The house is encompassed about, coming from every angle. Lot went out at the door unto them. He stood up to the evil influences. There's at least some courage. He shut the door after him, so he's still trying to protect those within. He's keeping them and those outside influences from becoming inside influences. He said, I pray you, brethren. Notice the word. He recognizes their shared humanity, and he says to them, do not so wickedly. In other words, he is passing judgment. Maybe that's why he's sitting at the gate, was sitting at the gate earlier. He's encouraging righteousness here. And then he says something shocking, according to the King James Version, at least. Our scholar, Jono from Australia, says, oh, like you mean don't rape these men? Rape my daughters instead? Well, Lot's just lost the Father of the Year award. Dysfunctional poster child of the year for deadbeat dads. Why God saved such a father is extremely, extremely hard to understand. And I thought this picture kind of helped in my mind. If the daughters are like, you what? Um, verse 8, behold, now I have two daughters which have not known man, so they're still virgins. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. Now, thankfully, we're going to insert in green right here the Joseph Smith translation, because right now this is going so fast and furious down, the plot line. I'm ready to leave the theater or turn the TV off. But Joseph Smith says, and what's really interesting is Joseph Smith took verse 8 and 9 and reversed the order and changed both verses quite a bit. So here's verse 9's change, but it's basically inserted right after the King James Version of verse 8. And they said unto him, Stand back. And they were angry with him. And they said among themselves, This one man came in to sojourn among us. So they were talking about Lot. And he will needs make himself to be a judge. So they're not happy with him hanging out there at the gates of the city, and now he's judging them. And then the verse continues. Joseph Smith says, Now we will deal worse with him than with them. Wherefore they said unto the man, We will have the men and thy daughters also, and we will do with them as seemeth us good. Now, with the King James Version, it makes you feel like these men only wanted other men to defile or to know in the biblical sense. Uh, but Joseph Smith says they would have taken both, which are both horrible. Jared Halverson says, Really? I've got some daughters that you could sexually assault? Now, this is horrifying if it's accurate. Thankfully, it isn't. The Joseph Smith translation made a major correction here, and according to the King James, it was, Don't touch the men, you can have my daughters. But according to the Joseph Smith version, Lot says, Don't touch the men, don't touch my daughters, don't do this wickedness. This is not right in any way. This you can't do. He stands up to them. It's a moment of incredible courage, not a horrific moment of capitulation. So thank you, Joseph, for restoring our faith in Lot, and in some ways restoring our faith in God, since Lot was considered righteous enough to spare. So again, the Joseph Smith translation helps us with this. Now, the verse that follows in the Joseph Smith translation goes like this. Now, this was after the wickedness of Sodom. And Lot said, Behold, now I have two daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, plead with my brethren that I may not bring them out unto you, and you shall not do unto them as seemeth good in your eyes. So he's protecting their virtue. For God will not justify his servant in this thing. Wherefore, let me plead with my brethren this once only, that unto these men ye do nothing, that they may have peace in my house. So he's also defending the angels. And then he ends this verse with, For therefore came they under the shadow of my roof, and they were angry with Lot, and came near to break the door. Wow, again we see we're at the battle line here, the door of his home. What influences, ask yourself, do we keep out? What will I let in and what do I keep out of our houses? Sadly, we live in a day that even our doors can't protect us. People will come in through the internet lines. We don't even need cables anymore. I'm grateful for Wi Fi, but boy, it's scary. The dividing lines have been so blurred in our day. We have to be incredibly vigilant. But also notice what they said. This one fellow, there's only one, we can stand up to him if and so he, Brother Howerson adds, so if you've ever felt like such a tiny minority, we can't stand up or make a difference. We can't say a thing. I'm only one. They also said in the verse, he came in to sojourn. In other words, he's not even one of us. He's a nomad. Sadly, it's a silent majority that is being cowed into submission by a very vocal minority on some of these social issues. And he's talking about our day. Well, it's just one, and I'm just a sojourner. In other words, this isn't permanent. Your position here is not viewed as permanent. You're an outsider, and perhaps the standard isn't permanent, but it is in this place. Brother Howerson continues, I don't know if we've ever seen a change so fast to make traditional marriage into a sojourner and one that no longer welcome in our society. It's amazing how fast that has happened. Then the third part from that verse he's focused on and helping us understand in the verse where it said, And you're going to be a judge of us? No, you can't judge us. This was the problem with Laman and Lemuel. They accused Lehi of being judgmental against the people of Jerusalem. They accused their little brother Nephi of wanting to judge them. How dare you think you can judge us or lead us in any way? It's so interesting how often you are accused of being judgmental, even when you're simply holding to the different standards or the traditional conservative righteous standards. Now, when the King James Version says, "Judge not that you be not judged," and that's in Matthew, well, if you want to look at Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 3, um, the Joseph Smith translation says it more clearly. King James says, "Judge not that you be not judged," but Joseph Smith clarifies, "Judge not unrighteously, but judge righteous judgment." And again, I think that goes well. If we could learn to pray for our enemies that they receive righteous judgment, which we would want for ourselves, we've truly turned the corner in understanding how to scripturally be aligned with God as we pray for our enemies. We don't want to put a hex on them, but we want God to give them righteous judgment, which each of us want for ourselves and those we love. Elder Maxwell once put it this way. He said, "The gradual normalization of aberration is the most subtle form of intimidation." And then Brother Halverson asked, "Do you feel intimidated by the fact that aberration has now become normalized?" At times I do. Brother Halverson continues in the Joseph Smith translation of here, verses 8 through 10. There's this interesting phrase spoken from the men of Sodom as they're ready to pound the door down. "Send out the men and send out your daughters. We'll take everybody." And it says, "And we will do with them as seemeth us good." So in the Joseph Smith translation, they're not going to distinguish between the male and the female. They want to do wickedness, and then it adds, "And now this was after the wickedness of Sodom." And Brother Halverson said, he's asking, did you catch those phrases? We're going to do what seems good to us. That's the definition today of moral relativism. That's the definition of you do you. And if it seems good to you, then it's probably good. This is what sociologists call the social construct of reality, or even the social construct of morality. It's only what we collectively decide, which is unfortunately a denial of God, a denial of ultimate truth, and a denial of independent morality. Instead, it's simply social construct and situation ethics. As verse 12 of the Joseph Smith translation said, this is after the wickedness of Sodom. This is just how it is here. This is our norm. This is the new norm. So quit fighting against it. Another phrase here from the Joseph Smith translation where he said, "God will not justify his servant in this thing. Wherefore let me plead with my brethren this once only, that unto these men ye do nothing, that they may have peace in my house." When Lot says God will not justify his servant in this thing, he's not talking about them, he's talking about himself. I'm God's servant, and he won't justify me in this thing. What thing? In not letting you know that what this is a wrong. If I'm not standing up for the truth, if I'm simply washing my hands of any kind of responsibility here and don't want to rock the boat, God will not justify his servant, me, in this thing. Do you understand, Brother Halverson says, how much courage it takes on the part of prophets and apostles to stand up to the popular opinions, to teach truth unapologetically? That takes guts. God cannot justify his servants for not doing that. It's amazing what they are willing to do. In fact, John the Baptist spoke truth. In power, he called out Herod for sins of immorality, and he paid for it with his life. But what does Jesus say about John the Baptist? He says, "What did you go out unto the wilderness to see? A reed shaken with the wind?" Is that what you were expecting? When I think about a reed, he says, Brother Howerson, a reed shaking in the wind, when the wind blows among the cattails, those reeds all bend in the direction that the wind is blowing them. I've never seen an obstinate reed stand up to the wind and say, "No, I will not cow your direction." They're standing up for truth, in a sense, and God justifies them in that. That would be a reference to John the Baptist and even our prophets and apostles today. Standing up for the truth, and God justifies them and us in that, even if a popular opinion won't. In fact, the opposite is true. God couldn't justify any of us or them if we did otherwise. Now, The other phrase Brother Hobson wants to focus on before we move on is in verse 14, let me plead with my brethren this once only, to do not anything wrong here. And that's a concern of mine. I really respect Lot for the first time. He won't justify me by doing nothing. God would not justify him. That's the point. But the second part is just once. He in that verse it uses the phrase just once. I've got to stand up to you. We might have to keep standing up when it matters. I'm going to try to put it this way, this one time, in this one instance, I've got to let you know how wrong this is. Because if we only stand up to specific instances, then it might seem like we're talking about preferences instead of principles. It might seem like we're trying to make exceptions, that we accept your general rule, and we can't do that either. Now, this is extremely hard to do in a pluralistic society, and that's definitely how we are today. We live in a society with a plurality of cultures and races and customs and religions. So, Brother Howerson continues. He adds a quote from Elder Packer. Elder Packer used to say, the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah seem to be localized in those places, but they are now generalized, and there's nowhere to go to escape Sodom and Gomorrah anymore. It's just not, it's just at the door, and we have to close that door. It's not that simple anymore. Now, I'd like to remind everybody of Elder Oak's quote, where he adds to Brother Packer's quote, and he says something along the lines of, what used to be localized and covered like a boil is now legalized and paraded like a banner. I remember sitting in conference when he said that, and how powerfully that struck me. Elder Packer and others have said it's no longer the great and spacious building over there across the river, and here we are safe behind our iron rod. No, now, thanks to technology, we're all growing up within the great and spacious building. Wow, did you hear what they said? We're now raising our families within the great and spacious building. We're raising our children within the great and spacious building of Lehi's dream. What are we going to do to establish some kind of sanctuary? Well, we get a hint of that in verses 10 and 11. But the men, that would be the angels, put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house unto them and shut the door. Verse 11, and they, again, the angels, smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. Now, Papa John adds here, even in their blindness, they continue to cry for anyone that they might find to have their sexual sick way with them. Brother Halverson adds to that. Can you picture all those newly blinded people that are just reaching and searching, trying to find a way in? That's a visual image that's haunting. It describes the world all around us. But if we can hold tight, if we can stick to our standards, will it get to a point where they just give up because they're tired of our obstinance and they realize that we're not giving up? Remember, Satan is good at persisting, but not so good at endurance. And that is so true. Satan, as powerfully as he is, doesn't seem to have endurance. Resist the devil, and he will flee from thee, as it says in James 4:7. Let them get tired before we do. That's the problem, I think. We tire before they do. All it takes for triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. And that's that famous quote from Edward Burke. So we have to do something, and we have to persist in doing it until they get tired instead of us. I really like that insight. Now, in verse 12, we're getting back to Lot and his family and these holy men. And the men said unto Lot, haste thou here any besides son-in-law, and thy sons and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. In verse 13, for we, and this is the angels speaking, will destroy this place before the cry of them. And who's the them? That would be the innocent victims. Is waxing great before the face of Jehovah, and Jehovah hath sent them, or sent us, the angels, to destroy it. So they're telling and explaining why they're here to begin with, to visit this city. They're here to destroy it. And verse 14, and Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-laws, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for Jehovah will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-laws. So, Papa John, my note here is in the King James Version, it appears that Lot had some older daughters already married, in addition to the two virgin daughters uh, that he seemed so easily to offer up to the mob of Sodomites. I'm grateful for the Joseph Smith translation for the slightly less offensive actions and motives offered by Lot. That's Papa John's reaction. It's still a disturbing story, and I'm not really that fond of going through this. I probably won't do this episode ever again. Now, verse 16, and while he lingered, the men, again the angels, laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his two daughters, and Jehovah being merciful unto him, and they, the angels, brought him forth and set him without the city. Brother Howerson, while he lingered, what's holding you back, Lot? Every verb we've ever seen so far has been fast and hastened and quick and run, and now he's lingering? Is he worried about his loved ones? Is he thinking about what he stands to lose? I don't know all the reasons, but he's lingering, and as he does, the men lay hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hands of his two daughters, and the Lord, or Jehovah, being merciful unto him, they brought him forth and set him without the city. It's like there's no time to linger. You were kind of pressed upon greatly. Uh, we are wise to yank you into the house the first time, but now there's no time to linger. I'm sorry. I have to go a little bit, be a little bit forceful unto you. I'm going to put my hands on you and pull you out of danger. You don't realize the danger you're in. And verse 17, and it came to pass when they, again the angels, had brought them forth abroad, that he, one of the angels speaking of Jehovah, so the angel speaking as in first person for Jehovah, said, Escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thee in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And Lot said unto them, the angels, Oh, not so, my Elohim. Are you crazy, Lot? Oh, my goodness. Verse 19, Behold, now thy servant, speaking of himself, hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape unto the mountain, lest some evil take me and I die. The end of that verse honestly makes no sense to me, Brother Halverson says. Lot, what do you mean some evil is going to take you and you're going to die? No, you're going to die if you stay right here, so climb. But then that other part of the phrase is beautiful, Brother Halverson says. I have found grace and you've magnified your mercy. I even wonder about that language sometimes, depending on how we feel about ourselves. And maybe this is Lot's problem. I've been in Sodom for way too long. I don't deserve to go to the mountaintop. I didn't stand up to evil like I should have. I didn't leaven the lump, so to speak. I failed you, God. We could have turned that whole city around. I didn't, so I can't go to the mountain. But then it says, I found grace. And the word found almost suggests it was hard to see. I had to search for it. No, it isn't. Grace is everywhere. So what did God do to help Lot find grace? He magnified his mercy. That's Brother Howerson is so good at seeing these little phrases and insights. And that's why I quote him so often. Verse 20 says, Behold, now this city is near to flee unto thee. So this small city, and it is a little one. So Lot is pointing to a small city. Oh, let me escape thither. It's this little one, and my soul shall live. Um, our Hebrew scholar says he is allowed to go there. And the interesting thing is that the angel says, Go now. I can't do anything until you get there. And that's verses 20 through 23. And verse 21, and he, one of the angels, speaking first person, said unto him, See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also. So he's accepted the desire of Lot to go to this small city. And the verse ends with, that I will not overthrow this city for which thou hast spoken. So he's going to wait until he gets out of the city and actually arrives at the small city before he destroys. Um, I'm skipping to verse 24 because we see the restored full name of God, the divine name used twice in this verse. And then Jehovah rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from Jehovah out of heaven. Verse 25, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities that were grown upon the ground. So every living thing, plants and everything were destroyed, not just the people and the animals. Everything was destroyed. Our Hebrew scholar adds this. What's interesting is that the whole area where Sodom and Gomorrah used to be is what today is the Dead Sea and the region of the Dead Sea. In Hebrew, it's not called the Dead Sea, it's called the Salt Sea. There are still areas of salt, like the Dead Sea, where you can find not just pillars of salt, you'll find mountains of salt. A lot of it is mined to this day. There's a company called the Dead Sea Works that's a salt company. But you can still find areas where you see pillars of salt, sheets of salt, and there's even a mountain of salt. Now that leads us to verse 26. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And our scholar from Australia adds this. He says, they were told just to go straight away. Don't turn around, don't delay. But his wife looked back behind, and she became a pillar of salt. Jared Halverson, our LDS scholar, adds, it's interesting, just like Sodom is so often remembered later in Scripture, at several points, Lot's wife is famously remembered too. The shortest verse in all of Scripture is, Jesus wept. And the second shortest is 3 words long, is remember Lot's wife. But what's the context of that? In Luke chapter 17, Jesus says first, as it was in the days of Noah. And then he describes what they were doing before the destruction. And then he says, how about an example number 2? Likewise, also it was in the days of Lot. They're still kind of going through the emotions, living their lives, and they're going they're not realizing that there are consequences to their decisions. And Christ adds, as in the days of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, and they sold, they planted, and they builded, and mostly for themselves. And then he adds, but the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven. It destroyed them all. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. He's talking about our day, and he's comparing it not only to Noah's day and the flood, he's now comparing our day to Sodom and Gomorrah. Brother Howerson says, no wonder there are so many parallels in that day. He shall be upon the housetop, and his stuff in the house. Let him not come down to take it away. He that is in the field, let him likewise not return. Then that all important phrase, remember Lot's wife. And the point being, don't go back to get what you missed. Leave it. In some ways, it's too late. And then there's one more thing about looking back. Let's save it until we get to Lot's daughters at the end of this chapter. It's a really weird story, but I think it ties into what just happened here with their mother. That was Brother Howerson. And then verse 27. And again, Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, before Jehovah. And he looked towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and towards all the land of the plain. And behold, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. Brother Halverson adds, this is not a refiner's fire, which we, as followers of God, sometimes experience as he refines our souls. This was a destroyer's fire. Verse 29, and it came to pass that when Elohim destroyed the cities of the plain, that Elohim remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in the which Lot dwelt. So God's kindness to Lot was actually kindness to Abraham, Brother Halverson says. I remembered him and the people that mattered to him. The fact that Abraham was willing to arm 318 servants and go rescue Lot previously from destruction, well, I guess as a God, I'll rescue Lot from this kind of destruction out of the kindness to Abraham. And verse 30, and Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. So it doesn't last long. This half measure of repentance is insufficient from Lot. So fine, he left Zoar and he dwelt in the mountain. He's finally made it, and his 2 daughters with him. Uh, but yet he leaves Zoar and he's dwelling in a cave with his 2 daughters. I guess yes, living in a cave is better than a mountain in Lot's mind, or it's better than a mansion in Sodom, definitely, which has now been destroyed. But this is where things get a little bit more weird. There's a lot of twists and turns, and you can't believe it can get worse. But here we go with verses 31 and through 33. And the firstborn said unto the younger, Our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come unto us after the manner of all the earth. Now, is that true? Actually, no, it's not. There are other cities, but in their minds, every city was wiped out just like the city that they came out of. Verse 32, Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our fathers. Verse 33, And they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Terrible, terrible part of the story. Now, the Joseph Smith translation for these verses adds, And they did wickedly. And Brother Halverson says, Thank you, Joseph, if this wasn't obvious enough already. Often there's a female equivalent to the male heroes we see in the scriptures, like the daughters of Oneida in the Pearl of Great Price, comparing them to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were such powerful examples of righteousness. They're heroes in that sense. But also there are times when there's a female equivalent to the male villains in Scripture, and in some ways, these daughters of Lot are the female equivalents of Ham and Noah, back when they were in the tent and saw their father's nakedness. But what's interesting is they both give birth to a son, and thus were both daughters of Lot with child by their father. Now, our scholar from Australia adds, These are messed up people. I think it's fair to say that this is a dysfunctional family. Now, that's an understatement. He goes, I think we can move on here, but who are the descendants that come from Lot, and which would be through his 2 daughters? Our Hebrew scholar says we have Ammon and Moab. We have the Ammonites and the Moabites, who are Israel's neighbors. We're actually commanded not to conquer their lands because they are descendants of Abraham, but they're obviously quite perverse. The Ammonites end up worshiping a god called Moloch, which is a god that the Israelites had emulated, and that was the main god of the Amorites, who were descendants from Lot and his daughters who raped him. Moloch, they would burn their children in fire to the god of Moloch. That was what they were known for. So they started off with a perverse family and continued in perverse traditions. Yet, and amazingly, Ruth is a descendant from the Moabites. She is a Moabitess, absolutely. She shows that Ruth shows that a person can overcome their heritage, even if we do come from the most perverse, abominable nation on earth. We still can choose to do good, not evil, and end up being a righteous person and having righteous people descend from them. And what's amazing is that through the Lot and his daughters, we get King David and the future Messiah himself are all descendants from Ruth the Moabitess. So I guess somehow God can make good things come out of bad things. thankfully. Our LDS scholar ends with this note. So don't look back. Please look forward and look forward with faith, knowing that there's hope for you. There's there are answers to your questions. There's healing ahead. There's an Isaac to come along. In fact, he's just 2 chapters away. Hold out for that. And so ends chapter 19. And so ends this episode of Papa John's Scripture Notes Projects. Hope that wasn't too much for you. Hang in there. Remember to choose the right, do good, continue to study and learn. And until next time, I will talk to you again soon if I can get this music to play. All right, here's our fadeaway.